It was supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of Canadian soccer history. I mean, the stage was perfectly set. You've got this massive, roaring home crowd, the weight of an entire nation's expectations, and a team right on the verge of doing something that had never been done before. But, in a split second, the beautiful game can remind us just how fragile those dreams truly are. Today, in this explainer, we're diving into a story of immense talent, devastating heartbreak, and honestly, unparalleled resilience. We're looking at the incredible journey of Ismaël Kenneth.
So, we unfortunately have to start with the moment that left the entire football world absolutely devastated. Early in the second half of Canada's co-hosted 2026 World Cup Group B match against Qatar, right there at BC Place in Vancouver, tragedy struck. Koné received the ball, right? What followed was a reckless, absolutely brutal tackle from behind by Qatar's Asim Matabo. Now, Matabi was promptly shown a red card, but the damage was already done. The impact was so severe, so intense, that the sickening sound of bone snapping could literally be heard all the way from the Canadian bench. Medical staff rushed the field, and Koné, in obvious agony, was stretchered off with his leg completely stabilized. In an instant, that electric stadium atmosphere just shifted to sheer horror. It completely silenced the crowd.
Now, despite the overwhelming tragedy of losing their star midfielder, the match obviously had to continue, and it resulted in this profoundly bittersweet piece of history. Canada actually went on to secure a massive 6-0 victory. And this wasn't just any win, guys. It was the nation's first ever men's World Cup win. But, as you can imagine, the players' minds were clearly with their fallen brother. The team emotionally dedicated this monumental victory entirely to Koné. The most poignant moment? It came when substitute Nathan Saliba scored this incredible free kick goal. Instead of a traditional celebration, Saliba immediately grabs Koné's iconic number 8 jersey and he held it high in the air to a tearful, roaring Vancouver crowd.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of this loss, we have to look at the man behind the jersey. How exactly does a single player rise up to become the absolute heartbeat of a rising footballing nation?
Well, to answer that, we've got to look back at where it all began. Ismaël Kenneth Koné was born on June 16, 2002 in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. But his Canadian story truly kicked off when he moved to Montreal with his family at just 7 years old. Growing up right in the heart of a vibrant immigrant community, his deep love for soccer just naturally flourished on the local Montreal pitches. This wasn't glamorous, top-tier academy football. This was pure grassroots passion. He spent his early days honing his raw skills with youth clubs like CS St. Laurent, literally learning the beautiful game from the ground up.
But the path to greatness is rarely a straight line, is it? As a teenager, Koné faced some really severe adversity. He traveled overseas, chasing that ultimate European dream, but he was met with crushing trial rejections in both Belgium and Portugal. Now, for a lot of young athletes, that kind of early failure is enough to make them hang up their boots for good. But Koné, he possessed this relentless work ethic and a raw physical power that simply could not be denied. So those European doors slammed shut, but his massive breakthrough actually arrived right back home. In 2021, Major League Soccer club CF Montreal saw exactly what those European scouts had missed. They signed him, and that set off an incredibly rapid ascent to global recognition.
Let's move on and see how this built, because from that initial 2021 signing, his trajectory was nothing short of meteoric. Once he got his foot in the door at CF Montreal, the global soccer community quickly realized they'd made a mistake passing him over. By January 2023, he secured a transfer back across the Atlantic to English Championship club Watford FC, and he adjusted instantly to the notoriously fast and physical demands of English football. And he didn't stop there. He went on to a high-profile stint with French League One giants Olympique de Marseille before ultimately taking his world-class attributes over to Italy's Serie A with Sassuolo.
But actually, I want to rewind just a second to really emphasize how explosive his initial arrival was back in North America. 32. During his phenomenal 2022 debut MLS season, Koné made 32 appearances and scored 4 goals. It all kicked off with a stunning professional debut in February 2022 during a really high-stakes CONCACAF Champions League match. I mean, in his very first game, he immediately scored a goal, instantly turning the heads of scouts worldwide. He wasn't just participating out there, he was dominating right out of the gate.
So how exactly was he dominating? It really comes down to a very specific, highly coveted skill set. Analysts call Koné a press-resistant dribbler. Basically, this means he has the rare ability to maintain possession and execute incredibly calm passing, even when opposing defenders are swarming him with intense physical pressure. When you combine that technical brilliance with his immense 6'2" physical presence, you get an instant, unshakable midfield anchor.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how seamlessly that exact skill set translated to elite Italian football. Playing for Sassuolo in Italy's prestigious Serie A, Koné established himself as a dynamic, absolutely tireless box-to-box midfielder. Over 35 appearances, he didn't just facilitate play, he was a constant offensive threat, netting 6 goals in one of the most tactically demanding leagues on the entire planet.
Of course, that level of club success inevitably translates to the international stage. And for Canada, his arrival honestly changed everything. After making his senior international debut in March 2022, he was fast-tracked right into Canada's historic 2022 World Cup squad in Qatar. At that tournament, he played in all 3 group stage matches against absolute powerhouses, Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco. But it was 2 years later, during the 2024 Copa América, where he truly solidified his status as a Canadian national hero, leading the team to a historic semi-final run.
And in that Copa América, man, he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he absolutely thrives on the grandest stages when the pressure is at its absolute highest. First, he famously stepped up to sink the decisive, heart-stopping winning penalty against Venezuela in the quarterfinals. Then he followed that up by scoring a truly spectacular volley goal against Uruguay. These weren't just goals, they were massive statement moments from a player who was literally putting an entire nation's midfield on his back.
Which unfortunately brings us painfully back to yesterday. The soaring highs of a historic career colliding with the devastating reality of the sport. Following that horrific tackle by Modibo, the team officially announced that Koné underwent surgery right there in Vancouver. The good news? The operation was highly successful, repairing severe fractures to both his tibia and his fibula. The grim reality, however, is that this injury officially rules him out for the entirety of the remainder of the 2026 World Cup tournament. For a player at the absolute peak of his powers, missing a home World Cup is just an unimaginable blow.
But guys, this is where the story shifts from physical talent to sheer mental fortitude. Just hours after waking up from this grueling surgery, with his World Cup dreams seemingly shattered, Koné released a deeply emotional and inspiring statement on social media. Expressing his profound faith, he wrote to the world, "Allah has never failed me." He made it incredibly clear that he views this devastating setback not as an end, but as a test of his faith and his character. And as a test, he is fully prepared to overcome. And the best part? He isn't going anywhere. Showing a level of incredible maturity and leadership that really belies his age, he thanked the millions of fans for their overwhelming prayers. But more importantly, he made a promise to his Canadian teammates. He vowed that he would step up as an honorary assistant coach from the sidelines for the rest of the tournament. He promised his brothers and his country that he will return stronger than ever to continue making history.
And I think this brilliantly illustrates the true measure of an athlete. It's easy to lead when you're scoring spectacular volleys and sinking winning penalties. But true character? That's forged in the darkest moments, in the hospital beds and on the sidelines. Ismaël Koné's physical leg may be broken, but his spirit remains entirely unbroken. Which leaves us all with a pretty powerful question to reflect on. When life unexpectedly breaks you down, taking away the very thing you've worked your whole life for, do you give up or do you find a way to step up and lead?